Hey guys, Devin Ridley at All Father Fitness, and today I'm going to be doing kind of a response video to Jeremy Ether's video on how hard you should train to build muscle or whether it negates the effects of building muscle or not. Now, Coach Greg actually beat me to this video once again. I don't know how he does that. I feel like he watches a video before they're even posted, but I will be putting both Jeremy Ether and Greg Doucette's video down in the description below, so feel free to watch that and kind of get their opinion and view on it as well as mine, and kind of through all the evidence that you see and the logical statements that everyone kind of puts out, make your own opinion based on what we all say. Now, I've watched this video, I've watched Coach Greg's video, and I'm going to be making my own, obviously. I'm making the video right here, but the way that I see Jeremy Ether post this video or make his video around is that you train every single set to failure, and he says that's actually a common conception, that people think it's better to train every single set to failure. Now, I've never seen anybody do that. I've never heard of anybody ever saying to do that or actually doing it. And Coach Greg actually said the same thing. I don't think anybody thinks that you need to take every single set to failure to get the maximum amount of muscle growth. So I think that's pretty illogical statement. He doesn't need to throw up some studies, or neither do I nor Coach Greg need to do that, because it just seems logical that taking every single set to failure would lead you to overtraining if you're doing it properly with right weight, like heavy enough weight to actually go to true eccentric failure. So I'm going to be doing an actual, my face is going to be in the corner of the screen. It's going to be playing Jeremy Ether's video in the background so I can kind of properly give reaction and explain some things in his video. Now, I made a video like this with another YouTuber making teaching men's fashion, and I noticed that the video was really, really loud and my voice was not. So hopefully I would manage to fix that. If I didn't, it's quite unfortunate. I'll just probably never do a video like this again, but I wanted to give it another shot. So let's just go right into it.
Let's get it out!
When it comes to maximizing muscle growth in the gym, it's common belief that the hardest worker in the gym is clearly going to get the most
He
gains.
said the hardest worker in the gym, which is true. The hardest worker in the gym does get the maximum amount of muscle growth. I can assure you, if they're doing it properly, obviously. But he said it's a common conception that people think that training to failure, absolute failure, every single set, or every single set and every single workout is better for muscle growth. I don't believe that anyone thinks that, to be completely honest. So yeah, I don't know, but we'll keep going.
Right? I mean, if you have the ability to do so, then surely pushing yourself to the limit to get that extra rep or two every single set is going to lead to more muscle growth and strength. Now, although this does have some merit, the truth is that in the case of how hard you should be training, it seems that training smarter instead of just training harder leads to better gains with less effort.
That's something I totally agree with. Training smarter is a lot better than training just completely harder, because if you think about it, if you have absolutely no gym knowledge, you just starting the gym, like let's say tomorrow you're starting the gym and you go in, you don't know anything about any lift, you don't know your maxes, so you can't get percentages, you don't know basically anything, you don't have proper form, proper weight, proper volume, you don't have a proper program, anything like that, and you just go in and lift like an animal, you're going to get gains because you'll be training hard, but you'll get way more gains if you were to have the knowledge that, say, me or Jeremy has with workouts, having perfect form, knowing our maxes and percentages based on those maxes, and training how we do. I feel like we'd get an exceptional amount more gains than a person who doesn't know what they're doing. So that's kind of why I'm so invested in reading studies and watching a lot of these videos, obviously, so I can get as much knowledge as I possibly can, so I can put them into the gym, and then I can see what works, what doesn't, through practical knowledge, and then I can deliver it through my videos to people that are new to the gym as well, like I would have been. So yeah.
But just how hard should you be training to maximize growth? Well, to answer this question, let's start with the theory behind being the hardest worker in the gym, which typically involves taking every set of your workout to failure, or in other words, to the point where you simply can't perform another.
Right here. And training to failure, there's different types of training to failure. Let's, like, in a rep or a set, you can train to absolute failure, which is where you just keep going, you push as many reps out as you possibly can until you can't possibly lift the weight anymore. And this is a good training, an advanced training kind of technique that you don't do every single set. You only do usually the very last set of your entire training. And I don't know if that's exactly what he's trying to say, whether you should or shouldn't do. That is something that I would normally do. I do that, not a lot, a good amount. And I think Coach Greg would agree that he goes to absolute failure on some things, but not every single set, which I think is what he's trying to portray it as. And I don't think anybody does that. I've said that like 3 or 4 times now in this video. So I think his video is based on a little bit of just he misinterpreted, or he is just thinking about something else, or I don't know, something like that.
Full rep without compromising your form. And this is commonly thought as the best way to train for muscle growth for a few main reasons. First is the idea of something called mechanical tension, which we know is the main driver of muscle growth. Now, in order to maximize mechanical tension and the resulting growth from each of your sets, you need to be able to recruit as many muscle fibers in your muscles as possible during that set. And what research has shown is that as we do additional repetitions and get closer and closer to failure during a set, the more motor unit recruitment and overall muscle activation are.
That is true. Now, when you get closer to failure, saying, let's say, like in this video, it says 10 reps is your absolute max. The more closer you get, the more muscle fibers you have to recruit, which means the more metabolic damage. Because if you're using more, let's say there's 10 fibers in here, and for each set you use 1 fiber, just as an example. It's not at all scientifically accurate, but let's say there's 10 fibers, and for each rep you use 1 fiber. So the first rep you do, it breaks down 1 fiber, and then now that fiber will grow. Now each rep you do, it'll use every single fiber, and it works the same because the more weak you get, really, the more the muscle has to work to get the weight up, and the more metabolic damage that'll cause. So that is true, but you don't need to go to absolute failure, and I'm going to explain how exactly I train, and I believe Coach Greg trains. That is this failure, the absolute failure that we're talking about, which is different to what the failure he's talking about. And that's what I meant by there's different types of training to failure.
Muscle experiences, meaning that in theory, training harder each set by going to failure would lead to more growth given the maximum motor unit recruitment and mechanical tension that it experiences. And second, similar to motor unit recruitment, muscle protein synthesis is lower when you don't train very hard in your sets as opposed to when you go to failure, which again would theoretically mean more growth when you train to failure given the...
Oh, shit. So this is basically what we just talked about, is the more muscle you use, muscle protein synthesis is where you take protein and you synthesize it into muscle. You break it down into aminos, and then it gets transported, and then that's what you use to rebuild your muscle. So obviously the more muscle breakdown you have, the more growth you're going to have, because you need more protein to make the muscle, right? And you need more growth to fix the little tears you had in your muscle. So that it does make sense, and everything he's putting out proves that the closer to failure you go, the more muscle growth you're going to have. That's what he's saying, but he's going to make points later in the video kind of disproving this, but you'll see it. So
mean more growth when you train to failure given the importance of protein synthesis levels for growth. And lastly, given the positive relationship we see between workout volume and muscle growth, it would seem that pushing each set to failure to get that extra rep or two would increase the overall workout volume you're doing and lead to more growth as a result. So with all of that being said, it seems that pushing each set as hard as you can during your workouts is sure to be your best bet for...
So this is basically everything we just covered. The harder you train, the more motor unit recruitment you need, which is muscle activation, and the greater muscle protein synthesis, because your muscle is broken down more. So the more volume and the more harder you train, the more muscle you'll get, which is what those little studies proved. But there's a cap on that. Eventually you'll hit a point where you're having negative effects instead of positive effects, and he's going to go in and explain that, and I will aid in that.
Maximize growth, right? Well, not so fast, because training to failure does come with a cost. Not only is it unenjoyable for most and requires a great deal of...
So training to failure is obviously training really hard. And he said it's not enjoyable to most to train very hard. In my opinion, if you're not going to train hard, you should not be in a gym A gym is a place to literally break yourself down to build yourself to be better. You can look at that as an analogy for muscle or a literal mental like capacity of your mind. You break yourself, you willingly go to the gym and you break yourself as far down as possibly as you can, and then you rebuild yourself at a literal molecular level as well as a mental fortitude level. So if you don't want to train hard, I suggest you find something harder to do or easier to do than something like this. You obviously shouldn't be watching a video how to get the most muscle without training so hard. That's kind of counterintuitive and just downright stupid, to be honest. Like, why would you're looking for a way out. You're trying to make things easy by doing something that you need to have strength to do, like mental strength. You need to do something hard, but you want to make it easier. And there's no way out of doing that. If something is going to be hard, if you have to do something hard to achieve something, don't find a shortcut for it. Just go for it and do the hard things that you need to do. I don't think I need to go much into that.
Motivation to do every workout, but it's also very fatiguing on the body. In fact, research has shown that training to failure causes excessive muscle damage and extends your recovery time considerably, with subjects generally requiring roughly 24 to 48 hours longer for the performance to fully recover when they
I'm sure this doesn't come as a surprise to anybody, but the harder you train, the more sore you are. The more sore you are, it lasts longer depending upon how long or how hard you trained. And this is where it has the negative effects that we're talking about. He basically proved that the harder you train, the more muscle growth you're going to have, but eventually you'll get into overtraining, which is because when you train super hard, you're sore, and by the time you hit that muscle group again, if you do a program like a push-pull legs and it lasts 48 hours or whatever, and then you're sore when you hit that muscle again, you're going to have negative effects because you're breaking down a muscle that isn't even fully built yet, and that's not good, obviously. But you can do things to where you don't need to train that extensively hard. You can still train to failure without it impeding your recovery like that. And I can prove it because I do it all the time. I train as hard as I possibly can every single time I hit the gym, but the next time I go and train that muscle, I'm perfectly fine. I have a really fast recovery speed because of not only the knowledge I have, but the way I train. And me and Coach Greg and Jeremy Ether have all made videos on how to increase your ability to recover faster, and I'd suggest watching any video like that because the faster you can recover, the harder you can hit a muscle and the more often you can hit it, which means more muscle over time as well as more muscle per workout, which is just more muscle overall. So that's what you want, right? That's why you're watching this video, and that's why you're watching the video I'm making. So
train to failure as opposed to stopping short of failure during each set, which is problematic because this delayed recovery and muscle damage can easily carry over into your next workouts for the week, and as a result hinder your performance in those workouts. And research has shown that when this is done over long periods, it eventually leads to a state of overtraining, which results in a reduction in your anabolic hormones and basically just creates an environment in your body that is detrimental to building muscle.
To be honest, logically think about the statement that people are overtraining. The body can go through such an incredible amount of pain and breakdown and things like that. It's really your mind that tells you not to do super hard things, and I'm sure many people know that. They just don't think about it or something. But how many people do you really think completely overtrain? Because like I said, I train hard every single day. I'm not even a pro. I don't take steroids. I don't take any super crazy supplements or anything like that. I literally just go to the gym, train as hard as I possibly can, and then I do cardio. I do it as hard as I possibly can. Any work I do as hard as I possibly can. And I don't overtrain. I know I don't because I feel perfect. I feel amazing every single day. So how many people do you really think are overtraining? Because if you really think you're out-training me, and you're overtraining, you're wrong. You don't, there's no possible way. You would have to be dying. You would have to be training so hard you'd be dying. That's just, not many people are able to do that. I don't think I'm even one that could train so hard that I'm getting close to literal death. I just don't think that's possible. Now, he's talking about an overtrained state in which you have a reduction in anabolic hormones like testosterone, and suboptimal environment for growth, which obviously means just reduction in anabolic hormones. So if you have that reduction, that's not good. But if you're in that overtrained state, shocker, stop training so hard. Like it's not some crazy, you don't need studies to say that. You just need a brain. Like if you're training so hard that it's getting hard to keep up, don't train so hard. Like it's not something super hard to like understand and just comprehend.
Muscle. Now, although we've gone over the various benefits and potential downsides of pushing yourself to the limit and training to failure every workout, we still have yet to answer the question, just how hard should you train to maximize growth? And well, it turns out that there is a sweet spot. But to figure out what exactly the sweet spot is, we need to go back and take a closer look at the theory behind training to failure to maximize growth.
So I just realized it took me a little bit to process that right there, but he talked about a sweet spot. And before, when he showed this little image up here, right, I talked about this little sweet spot, that there's a point, there's a capping point in which you train to failure, and there's like that sweet spot, which is a point in which there's such a low amount of intensity you put into a workout that you're getting suboptimal gains, and there's a high cap where if you go past that, you're getting negative effects, which means that you're so sore that the next time you work that muscle out, you're breaking a muscle down that's already broken, hasn't built itself up yet. So he shows studies and tries to prove that there's a sweet spot between an RPE of whatever, he'll list it, and I believe that to be true, and I'm sure everybody else can logically see and think about that rather than see studies. But
because first of all, although it's true that motor unit recruitment and muscle activation does increase as you approach failure in a set, as shown in the following graphs, analyzing the shoulders and the trapezius muscles, it actually seems to plateau at around 3 to 5 reps shy from failure. Meaning that if you knew you could do 15 reps of lateral raises and not a single more before your form broke down, then performing just 10 to 12 reps out of that 15 by leaving a few reps in the tank would be sufficient.
So what he's talking about right now is a thing called RPE, and usually you cap your RPE at a level of 1 to 10. 10 being, let's say you're doing a bench press and you're doing however much weight you could do for 10 reps. Now, when you hit RPE 10, it means you can't get an 11th rep with that certain weight. So if you do an RPE of 5, it means you did 5 reps of that weight of 10. So it means you did your 50% of what your 100% would be, but with the same weight. It's just the reppage, not the actual weight change. So, for example, let's say just 100 pounds. For 100 pounds on a bench press, you could bench it 10 times, but you could not get an 11th no matter how hard you tried. No matter if there was a gun at your head or if someone had bet you $1 million, you could not get that 11th rep. That would mean you went to RPE of 10. So he's saying if you go between, I believe he said 3 to 5 reps shy of failure, which means RPE of 5 through 7. I feel like that's a little bit low, but that's what he said. That's what the studies say. So that's what RPE means. Just give it a little explanation of that so you could better understand it. It's a little bit more complex, and it's not even really for bodybuilders. It's more for strength training and stuff, but it's still a good thing to know and a good thing to accurately describe certain things. So
to pretty much maximize your motor unit recruitment. And the same is true with the muscle protein synthesis theory. It seems that if you train close enough to failure by leaving just a few reps in the tank, then you're able to still maximize muscle protein synthesis, but without much of the extra fatigue.
Okay, so this is the sweet spot he's talking about, which was between that RPE of 5 to 7. So he's saying that you can still recruit the same amount of muscle fibers as if you were to go to absolute failure, because obviously you only have so many muscle fibers in your muscle, so you can stop a few reps shy of complete failure and still have the exact same benefits, which I totally agree with. So I'm sure he's right on that, and the studies prove it. So
that you get from going to failure. And lastly, although you would think that training to failure would result in more workout volume since you're pushing to get that extra rep or two each set, that actually isn't the case. Research has shown that the muscular fatigue caused by going to failure in your first set causes your performance to suffer in your next sets, leading to considerably less reps being performed in those next sets. Whereas if you instead leave a few reps in the tank during your first set, your performance in subsequent sets doesn't suffer nearly as much, and you're able to perform more reps during those latter sets as a result. As a result of this, by the end of the workout,
So this actually makes a lot of sense, and I'm glad he brought up this point. Now, if you do set 1, 10 reps, set 2, 8 reps, and set 3, 6 reps, you're getting 24 reps. I could have just read it. I didn't have to do it in my head. 24 reps. Now, your first set, you went to absolute failure, and obviously for your next set, you can't do the same thing because you just put so much tax on your body that you have to go lower with the same lower reps with the same weight. So instead of doing 10, 8, and 6, you can do 8, 8, and 8, which still equals 24 reps, which is the same volume, but you're not taxing your body as much, which means you're still using this. I feel as though you don't recruit nearly as much muscle growth, but that is optimally better for you because you use the same amount of weight and you use the same amount of reps, and you can do that until you can no longer do that. And I believe I've heard Coach Greg say this is where you take a weight and you do your reps on it, and you don't go to max, but you go just shy of max, which is exactly what he's talking about. So it would be that 8. And what he did to find this is he went and did his max. He did 10, 8, and 6 for his max, and he got 24. He divided it by 3, so it goes equally into all 3 sets. So what you do is you get that weight, and then you do your 8, and then for your second set you get 8 again, and you do your third, you get 8 again, and then for your fourth, if you get 7, you're done. You don't do any more of that exercise because you're done. You can't get that 8 unless you took a shorter rest. So time your rests, and for your first set, if you get 8, for your second set, after a minute or 2 of rest, and you get 8 again, you just keep getting 8 over and over and over. Keep going until you can no longer get 8, and that means you recruited as much muscle as you possibly can without actually going to true failure and risking not only injuring yourself, but also that negative effect of just going too far in the failure process, right?
all of the subjects in this study ended up performing the same amount of volume, but those who trained to failure required a lot more effort to do so. So based on these findings, it seems that taking your sets just shy of failure by leaving roughly 1 to 3 reps in the tank is going to be your best bet, since this still enables you to maximize your motor unit recruitment and workout volume, but with less effort and without compromising your recovery. What does research say though? Well, the majority of research out there, especially recent and well-designed papers, are in support of this, and have found that as long as you're taking your sets close enough to failure by stopping each set with just 3 reps or so in the tank, then you'll experience the same amount of growth as you would when compared to taking...
I actually misinterpreted something. He's saying stopping short of failure from 1 to 3 reps, which means he's at an RP of 7 and up, not of 5 through 7. So that means you stop shy 1 to 3 reps. So how you really figure that out is you have to have a spotter with you, do the bench press, say, and go to absolute failure. You have to do it at least 1 time, and then you can figure out, okay, so if I can only do this amount of weight with this many reps, then I need to do at least minimum of, or maximum of 3 reps less than, right? So that's how you'd find that, right? And there's such thing as going past failure, so you can do that too. It's something like, if you were to do a bicep curl, I actually do this a lot. You go to a bicep curl and you get to your last one, you can't even get it up right. You drop it and you swing it up, and then you drop it, because in the concentric movement of basically any exercise, it actually stretches your muscle and breaks it down more. So doing concentric movements slower will have more muscle breakdown, but I still didn't recruit muscle because I didn't have to force it up. So I go technically beyond failure doing that exercise. And you can do that with a lot of exercises, including the bench press. You just get your your spotter to pull it off, and then you just slowly drop it to your chest, pull it off, and whatever. So yeah, that's how you find that. And I go around and test. If you're a beginner, do not try doing anything super extreme like this. But if you want to start upping your training and just making it a little bit more difficult, try doing some of these advanced techniques and stuff and see how you like them or you don't. and just kind of play around with it. You got to test to see what works and what doesn't.
In the sets to complete failure. And probably the best evidence of this to date is a 2019 paper from the journal Strength and Conditioning Research, which had 10 subjects perform the leg extension to failure on one leg, whereas on the other leg, they instead stopped 1 to 3 reps short of failure during each of their sets. After 14 weeks, despite both legs performing the same amount of volume, the non-failure leg actually ended up seeing slightly better growth, strength, and muscular endurance when compared to the failure leg, suggesting that you may even reap slightly better gains when you leave a rep or two in the tank during your sets. However, do keep in mind that on the other end of the spectrum, research has shown that stopping well short of failure, so for example, stopping at 5 reps in a set when you could have done 10 reps to failure, is inferior for muscle growth, meaning that it is crucial that you do get close enough to failure during your sets in order to still maximize growth, and that doesn't mean that your training becomes easy or a walk in the park, because that's not the case at all. I mean, for example, here I'm doing a set of curls and taking the set to true complete failure, which, as you can see, is extremely taxing and fatiguing to do, especially first thing in the morning. But even if I had stopped 1 to 3 reps short of the very last rep that I did, you can still tell that it's still a very demanding and hard set to do. And unfortunately, even though you should be stopping a few reps short of failure, most people underestimate the amount of reps that they can actually do to failure and end up training too easy as a result. And this was shown in a 2017 paper that had subjects ranging from beginners to intermediates to experts in the gym try to predict how many reps that they could do to failure during their sets of various exercises. They found that subjects significantly underpredicted the number of reps that they could do to failure, with the least experienced lifters underpredicting by around 4 to 5 reps on average, and the most experienced lifters underpredicting by around 1 to 2 reps on average. Meaning that your ability to predict how many reps that you can actually do all out in a set improves as you gain more experience, which implies that if you're relatively new in the gym and drastically underestimating what you're capable of, this can be detrimental to your gains given the importance of pushing our sets close enough to true failure if we want to maximize growth. Aside from just gaining more experience though, one way that you can ensure that you're actually pushing hard enough during your sets for an exercise is to dedicate a day where you use a spotter and try to get as many reps as you can during each of your sets. So let's say that for the bench press you managed to hit 10 reps, 8 reps, then 6 reps by going all out trying to get as many reps as possible each set at a certain weight. What you can do now is add these reps up together to get a total and then divide this number by the number of sets that you did. So in this case it would be 3. And this number then gives you a good indication of what you want to aim for next time, as it'll represent the theoretical number of reps that you'll be able to hit per set without going to complete failure. You can always adjust accordingly if that ends up being too tough or too easy, but you just want to use that number as the baseline to progress from as you get stronger and as that becomes too easy. So to conclude, based on the research that we have to date, it seems that
you heard it from both of us. There is that sweet spot. Now, he talks about, like I said many times, I think he misinterpreted a lot of things, like training to absolute failure every single set. I don't think anybody does that. Don't think people just normally do that or talk about it or whatever, because I've never seen somebody do that. And obviously just logically thinking about that, that's way too hard on the body. Now, me and Coach Greg actually have a very similar mindset when it comes. We train to failure in a way that we don't train to failure in our sets, but we train to failure in a workout. So if I'm doing a push day, at the end of the day, I can't even do one rep I can't do 1 rep of a bench or anything like that. I train until I just fatigue out, but I don't ever train the set to failure unless I really need to, but I don't really do it on compounds. So take away from that what you will. I don't think you should train often your sets to failure. I don't think you should do it simultaneously, either set 1 failure, set 2 failure, set 3 failure, but doing like your last set to failure of the day, I don't really see that as detrimental. It just kind of gives you an extra boost to your intensity, and it also provides you a higher level of adaptation when you go to the gym next, because that's what the gym is all about. That's how you build muscle, through progressive overload. You have to train harder than last time, quoted by Coach Greg, to gain muscle for the next time and gain strength. You have to adapt to the weights and how much reps you're doing. So eventually, doing those 8 that he listed, your 8 for the first set, 8 for the second, 8 for the third, that's going to get too easy for you, so you have to train harder than last time. But that doesn't mean train to failure every single set. It just means you have to train harder, and if you train too hard, you have to train easier. It's really not a crazy hard thing to do, and I've talked about this before, not specifically this, but the fact that the way I set my program up is that it's so adaptable to what my needs are for the workout. If I feel like I could go harder in that workout, I leave room for me to be able to go and do that. If I feel like I need to go easier because I'm still maybe a little run down or anything like that, then I can go easier. I have the ability to adapt my workout that way, but I don't need to just go to absolute failure to get a good workout, and I get a perfectly good workout training for the entire workout going to failure instead of just doing a set to failure. And it doesn't impede my progress of muscle growth, strength growth, and it doesn't impede my ability to hit that muscle again in 2 days or so. And I can do the exact same thing over and over again without ever having to stop and recover a huge amount because I just tax my body too much. So try to make programs like that, or find programs that you can adapt like that, because it's very important that you have a program that adapts to your needs and what exactly you're basically doing or what you're doing it for, obviously. So that's really all I got. I'd suggest watching, you obviously watched his, you've obviously watched mine if you're watching right now, but watch Coach Greg's as well. Me and him have the kind of the same reaction, I guess, to this video, but I'd still definitely recommend watching his video. It's good to have multiple viewpoints, which is why when I make videos about people, I always list as many people that made videos about this video or about this person or whatever in the description or up his cards, because getting multiple viewpoints and just hearing what multiple people have to say and getting kind of their opinions and the facts that they're able to give off, like Jeremy Ether might have thrown up a bunch of studies, but Coach Greg and I myself right now will say that studies aren't 100% accurate, and it's almost impossible to make them completely accurate unless it's at a almost molecular level. You can't, like for that study about how the people trained one leg super, super hard and they trained the other leg not nearly as hard. It didn't combine the fact that they could have been doing other things in the gym. It didn't combine the fact, or didn't say whether they were beginners, advanced, super advanced. Didn't say if they were on things like PDs, HRT, and tests or anything like that. It didn't say if they were women or men. It didn't say anything like that. No injuries. Like, studies aren't always accurate like that. They can't be 100%, which is why you'll almost never see me do a video and throw studies up like that unless it's something at the molecular level, like my Sarah's Discovery. It's about a drug that you take, and I looked at the molecular, like what that drug does molecularly to your body and what it can and can't do depending on what she said it can and can't do. That's different than just throwing a study up about training and things like that. So take studies with a grain of salt. That's what me and Coach Greg would agree on 100%, that they're not always accurate, but they do offer you a very good stable foundation of what could be true. So it's good to read them. I do read studies. I look and watch videos about studies and all that. But my knowledge isn't based around, or 100% based around a study or multiple studies. So if you learn something about this video, it's that don't take studies for like truth. They're not like God's word. They're not laws, right? So people like Jeremy Ether and Jeff Nippard, I think they're like the biggest YouTubers that throw studies up and try to prove with big fancy words and all that. I don't think it's not right to do that, because it's nice to just see a study and notice that, hey, this is actually proven by science or whatever or whatnot. But it also is just kind of dishonest because studies aren't always true and all that. But you can have your own opinion on that. I'm not going to force you to believe anything. That's really all I got for this topic. Unfortunately, Coach Greg beat me to again. Still kind of pissed off, but that's fine. You know the drill. Sub to the channel if you like the content provided. Like it, obviously, if you like the content provided. Comment if you have any questions, or DM me personally, and I will answer them. And I'll see you in the next one.